What is this free gas that we don't see or feel, but that we breathe? Why is it so essential for our body? What is this process of breathing? Why do we take these breaths? Why do people end up in intensive care when they can breathe? Why can't we hold our breath for a long time and just not breathe? What is oxygen for us? Why is it important?
It's all about quality, global equality. In our lives, it changes me. So look, here's a fact. So you're talking about tissue respiration, right? This is tissue respiration, the value of tissue respiration. I know well, because when we save patients in intensive care, just a little bit of oxygen added makes it easier for them. You can see it right away. He starts to turn pink immediately. Let's say he's blue and he's convulsing there. I gave him a little extra. I adjusted the oxygen there, gave him the medication, expanded the vessels, and he starts to turn pink. He feels better. He stabilizes. You can really feel that, but for some reason, this is so characteristic of humans. I'm tired out of myself even, of my own body. I think, God, how much I've already forgotten, how many times I've struggled with my health, how many times I couldn't get up, my joints were hurting. All of this starts to fade quickly because I take Synthesit. It feels like it never happened, like it was always this way. My joints were hurting. All of this starts to fade quickly because I take Synthesit. It feels like it never happened, like it was always this way. No, I'm not criticizing cardiologists. We have very good, very experienced cardiologists. In this regard, well, I just know, well, it's not even about that. It's just that the cardiologist has no choice. He doesn't have any reserve drugs. He only has these drugs that are his. He can only prescribe them. If, for example, someone told him, try Synthesit, then the cardiologist would gladly prescribe Synthesit. If a person said, maybe you could prescribe me Synthesit, of course, he would give it. Because giving one medication that solves all the problems is much better than prescribing a bunch of different medications that will, on the contrary, create additional problems. It's much better than prescribing a bunch of different medications that would, on the contrary, create additional problems. Before, it was practically impossible for him to even step outside. He would just start to choke right away. His fingertips would turn blue. His fingertips were turning blue and he couldn't breathe at all. Now he walks. And he has an active life. He started cooking and doing laundry.
Greetings, esteemed viewers. Today, we are delighted to welcome you to our channel, where we explore the fascinating world of the bioactive mineral known as Synthesit. This unique mineral offers a range of benefits and insights that we are excited to share with you. On this channel, people gather to share their stories about taking Synthesit. And sometimes we have doctors on the air who talk about how Synthesit works, how it affects their patients, and share some of their observations, including from the medical world. And today we have as our guest, already from last time, for this month, the doctor is an anesthesiologist, a doctor, with 25 years of experience, Konstantin Lvovich Kozyayev. Hello, Konstantin Lvovich.
Hello.
Yes, dear viewers, in our last recording, which we will definitely link to this one in the video, Konstantin Lvovich shared his experiences. The sensations from the beginning of taking Synthesit, that is, a little time has passed since starting this bioactive mineral, and Konstantin Lvovich shared his observations with his sensations and improvements. And today we will have several questions for Konstantin Lvovich, so we can delve deeper into some topics that are specifically related to Konstantin Lvovich's work as a doctor. So you all understand perfectly that anesthesiology is a field where a person is in a state of balance between life and death. And the doctor who is directly helping them at that moment is responsible for ensuring that the person makes it through, that they stay in this life and continue their life journey. His mood, he balances between life and death, and the doctor who is directly helping them at that moment is responsible for ensuring that the person makes it through, that they stay in this life and continue their life journey. Therefore, this doctor, more than anyone else, understands the importance of certain processes. And one of those processes is tissue respiration. That's exactly what hemoglobin does. It carries oxygen. It carries carbon dioxide from the lungs to the organs and back. And Konstantin Lvovich will directly share the continuation of his Synthesit course today, because some more time has passed since he started, and then his father took it. And we will also try to ask in as much detail as possible about the specifics of an anesthesiologist, about the importance of oxygen, and the role of oxygen in everyday life. So, Konstantin Lvovich, now I'll hand it over to you for a moment. Could you tell us how your experience with the bioactive mineral progressed? Synthesit, what additional sensations have you experienced, impressions? And we will try to connect this with your medical practice, with what you saw back then and what you see now, So the floor is yours.
A month and a half ago, my family unexpectedly and quite suddenly encountered a rather serious and somewhat catastrophic situation because my osteochondrosis flared up, which was quite challenging for us. The compression of the femoral nerve worsened. I was indeed semi-mobile, meaning I truly couldn't lift heavy things. And it was quite challenging. It was extremely difficult for me. And my father was the same. Well, my father is 81 years old, and my dad is 82. He also had a worsening of shortness of breath in May. He struggled to climb the stairs. I couldn't put on socks or shoes. He was short of breath. He bent down to put on his shoes, and that was it. He had to stop. Almost stopping, I always watched him with fear. If he was climbing uphill, he would also start to get short of breath. Once he almost fell in the park. People just sat him down on a bench. Well, in general, he started looking for a cemetery. He started looking online, saying that that's it, he can't go on any longer. Such is life. He says, it's a burden for you. And I'm already afraid myself. That's it. Well, I also realized that, let's say, this toast-chondros of mine, it has lowered the quality of my life so much. So I just lost that physical activity and was forced to take a back seat in everything. Because I already told the kids, you do it yourselves. I can't lift this, for example, some weight and so on. Because, as I mentioned earlier, I already informed the kids, you do it yourselves. And I said, I can't lift this, for example, some weight and so on. To them, that's it. So, practically. When it comes to this ad, the ad for Synthesit, I listened to it with Anya Slorida, a blogger. And I must say, for more than a year, very extensively and thoroughly, over this period.
No, well, not more than a year. We haven't been doing it for a year. Probably less than 6 months. Yeah, since last October, maybe. Oh, really? I don't remember exactly, yeah, but definitely not a year less.
Great. So, I was listening to this ad and somehow I was really getting into it, but I just couldn't connect that information to my own situation. They were just saying that oxygen is supplied, but what does that actually do? For my illness and my father's illness, I couldn't understand that. So, in the end, I decided to go for it and bought Synthesize. And I immediately started taking it myself at first. A few days later, I convinced my father that he needed to take it. And somehow everything went really well for us from the very beginning. Because I immediately felt a certain boost, which kept increasing, like my strength was growing. The more I took it, the more my strength increased. The more I took, my endurance increased. I started taking on more loads. And then my father did the same. At first, for a few days, it was kind of subtle, but then he also started to come around. He started to gradually come around from this standstill. So in the end, after almost a month and a half, this is how I've been taking it. As a result, I started moving around freely. I began to take on more loads, and my day got longer. I get a lot of work done in a day. I'm coming home from work, not a little tired. I feel absolutely energetic now, full of life, fresh. I get home, go to the store, or do everything there. I can even run. And my father also started to feel better. In the end, just the other day, he told me, I can put on my socks now. I can put on my shoes. That's it. Yesterday, he went for a walk twice a day, even though it's really hot here. He went out twice. He went out once and came back. Before, it was practically impossible for him to even just step outside. He would just start gasping for air right away. His lips would turn blue. The tips of his fingers, his lips would turn blue, and he couldn't breathe at all. Now he walks around, he has an active life. He even started cooking and doing laundry. And in the end, a new era has come for my father and me. So we moved from one reality to another. We became active and our plans changed right away. So I see my father looked at it and said, they're going to raise my pension, so I guess I'll live a bit longer.
So he's not planning to look for a place for himself anymore.
Yeah, he's already started calculating here. Here I have this. It's profit. The longer I live, the more pension I can bring you. So we immediately changed And I've changed my plans too. I've also become more, let's say, decisive. My brain has started working very actively. The joints have loosened up. And in the end, I developed almost like a personal relationship with the Synthesize. You know, when I wake up in the morning, it's almost like my morning prayer. In a way, I can just feel it. I take it, I accept it, and I can feel how it spreads. You know, there's this kind of ringing, a light ringing, and it's like the body tunes in. It tunes into this wave. And, well, it seems, for example, like charging a battery. And I feel this charge throughout the whole day. I'm already good for the rest of the day. I feel really good, practically, no matter what the conditions are. There's heat, stress that weighs down on a person and so on. I'm freely getting through this day. And what I've also noticed is that, you know, a person quickly forgets the bad. Well, he started feeling good and he immediately forgot what? He couldn't walk there, that he was crawling on his hands and knees there, that he was really feeling terrible. He says, well, I think for some reason, this is so typical of a person. And I even started to blame myself. I think, Lord, how many times have I already forgotten about feeling unwell? How many times my head has spun? How many times I couldn't get up? My joints were hurting. All of this starts to be quickly forgotten because you take the Synthesize and it feels like it never happened, like it was always this way. And then I even started to scold myself. I think, well, you can't be that ungrateful and subjective. Well, I even remembered Krylov's fable when a bear attacked a man, he would have been done for if another man hadn't shot it with a gun. The bear, that's it. And this saved man, instead of hugging and kissing his savior, says to him, you ruined the bear's skin. You ruined it. How could you? What have you done? That is just how a person is structured, how ungrateful they are, how quickly they forget kindness. This is an amazing thing, really. And in the end, I realized that, of course, the Synthesize has completely changed our lives. It has changed the quality of our lives. And I realized that it is precisely the quality, the overall quality of our lives that is changing. So look, here's a fact. You're talking about tissue respiration. I know this price of tissue respiration very well. Because when we save patients in the ICU, when they just need a little bit, we add oxygen. You can see it right away in his eyes. He starts to turn pink immediately. For example, when he's blue and having spasms, I just added a little bit to him. I adjusted the oxygen, gave him the medications, and dilated the blood vessels. And he starts to turn pink. He feels better. He stabilizes. You can really feel it, but there are situations when it's impossible to add oxygen because it's just not feasible. That's why such complex, cumbersome schemes were developed, like hyperbaric chambers, where this patient was planned to be placed. Well, they do this for very seriously ill patients, for whom it's hard to deliver oxygen. They place them in these chambers, and this oxygen goes in, and thanks to the pressure of the oxygen, it penetrates into all the tissues, into all these places, and it starts to show positive dynamics in the patient. Hypothermic treatment is also being developed, where low temperatures help to preserve and conserve oxygen in the body, such as during medical procedures. So everywhere they strive to conserve oxygen.
So, to provide enough for the patient, they either aim to saturate or conserve, right? Hyperbaric oxygenation, meaning saturation, cooling, they sort of slow down all the processes to not need as much oxygen. Hyperbaric oxygenation, that is saturation, cooling, as if they, it turns out, save by slowing down all processes so that not so much we needed oxygen.
Yes, all right. And then this event happened. I took my dad to the clinic. Well, I decided to take him because he had been complaining, you know, about 6 months ago. He said, I can't breathe, I just can't. He used to be able to manage it somehow, so I took him to a cardiologist. The cardiologist checked him, took his blood pressure, and prescribed him 3 medications. These medications are now cutting edge. Almost 90% of people with heart disease are taking them. This is it. Calcium blocker, beta blocker, and ACE inhibitor, angiotensin converting enzyme. These are types of medications used to treat various cardiovascular conditions. They work by affecting the heart and blood vessels in different ways. I prescribed 3 medications, and eventually my father and I come home. She prescribed him to take 3 tablets in the morning, and then in the evening everything else. He takes 3 tablets in the morning, so I throw it to him. It's good that I checked his blood pressure. I checked his blood pressure and I see it's 80. I said, well, Dad, we need to call an ambulance. That's it. And while I was running around there, I didn't know what to grab onto anymore. I gave him coffee there. Well, just coffee. It's not a very good medication. Caffeine is better. If there was a caffeine medication, I would have given it to him to raise his blood pressure. And he was in such a lax state. Thank God he held on. His heart held up. It would have just killed him if I hadn't been home. It would have simply killed him. So he took the medications that were prescribed to him. No, I'm not criticizing cardiologists. I'm not even criticizing the medications. I'm just saying that these are such powerful drugs. Why are they even prescribed? These medications, yes. What's the goal? The thing is to deliver oxygen to the right place. Well, let's say the most important place for us is the brain, where the body primarily tries to deliver oxygen. Well, the myocardium is in second place. What's happening? So the whole body, when it senses some kind of danger, sees that not enough oxygen is getting to the brain. Well, for various reasons. For example, in elderly people, they have a very rigid vascular system. It's stiff and inflexible. So to deliver that blood to the brain, you need to raise the blood pressure. And the body starts to raise the blood pressure. This is a symptom, a sign. And what do? We start treating the symptom. So they don't treat the actual cause. They don't provide that oxygen. They don't think about it. How to provide it, and instead they start fighting against the blood pressure. And they prescribe antihypertensive medications to the patient to lower their blood pressure, not to give him oxygen. You can take any instruction. If you read this instruction, you'll just be shocked. You'll just be shocked. It says that in order to provide this oxygen initially, and essentially, first of all, the tissue's need for oxygen is reduced after it has been effectively reduced. Then subsequently, a number of various other things start happening as well indeed. There you go, indeed. And I even mean really. Well, just if you even count up all those unpleasant things that happen which cause. Just a second. So I'm just, there. So what happens? What side effects does the medication have? So peripheral edema, tachycardia, skin hyperemia, arterial hypotension, arrhythmia, shortness of breath, nausea, abdominal pain, gum hyperplasia, headache, fatigue, drowsiness, dizziness, paresthesia, skin rash, pain in the limbs, and so on and so forth. There you go. Then it means the blood pressure drops sharply, just to lower the pressure, as they assume. Well, how is it supposed to deliver this oxygen? Let's say the person has to endure it in the brain like this. Well, such an insane load, it also blocks it. AV conduction, atrioventricular conduction. So this is the foundation of our heart automation. So it blocks this automation. And to make the heart contract less, it reduces the heart's contractility, it reduces the strength of contraction, and slows down the pulse. And then, well, what else does it do? In the end, ultimately, they bring it to the point where the heart is essentially functioning in some sort of half mode, in a way that is kind of a state of partial operation in a semi-load. So they put it in a Procrustean bed, exactly in such a situation. So the cost of delivering oxygen is very high because of these medications. So you can also understand the cardiologist that in the end, when he prescribes these medications, he simply has no other choice. So he comes to him like, for example, my father, and says, I feel weak, tired, it's hard for me. Well, what does the cardiologist think? Well, okay, I measured his blood pressure. His blood pressure is 150. Well, the person is nervous, at the doctor's. I'll give him an antihypertensive to lower his blood pressure. And he prescribes it to him. But what a person really needs are not these crazy medications. What he needs is to have strength, to have endurance, so he can withstand these loads. But instead, he is given medications that, on the contrary, weaken him even more. So that's the situation. And that's why I have to measure my father's blood pressure all the time, out of fear. Well, thank God now he has stopped taking those medications. Now he's only taking one Synthesit. He's already dancing a bit, walking around. He's very happy, and he's leading a very active lifestyle. Just look, even this shelter, what is it doing? It causes weakness, diarrhea, dry cough, nausea, vomiting, orthostatic hypotension, skin rash, chest pain, angioedema, and other symptoms such as fatigue and dizziness, which can lead to further complications. From the cardiovascular side, there is a significant drop in blood pressure, orthostatic hypotension, kidney function impairment, and heart rhythm disturbances. Well, and so on. You know, what bothered me the most here, what's happening with the blood system. Leukopenia, neutropenia. Agranulocytosis, thrombocytopenia with prolonged treatment, a slight decrease in hemoglobin concentration, hematocrit, and erythropenia. Everything that the Synthesit undoubtedly addresses and treats, this medication certainly and effectively suppresses. It significantly depresses all these stem cells that the Synthesit works so diligently to create. In fact, it does, yes, this medication. He's just ruining it. And for what purpose? He's ruining it to lower a person's blood pressure. But that's just ridiculous. To relieve the symptom, it disrupts this blood-forming system, the formation of these cells and so on. So you see, it turns out this is just ridiculous. I don't know. That's why I say Synthesit. I just adore this medication. I really do see it as a lifesaver. I just adore it. It's truly a lifesaver. Because, well, really, there's just no equivalent to it. It really works. So a person comes in and says, I feel weak, I'm struggling, I have shortness of breath. The doctor tells him, here, please take Synthesit. He took it, and all of that went away. And if he gives him those medications that our cardiologists prescribe, no. I'm not criticizing the cardiologists. We have very good cardiologists, very experienced ones. In this regard, well, I just know, but that's not even the point. The cardiologist just doesn't have the choice. He doesn't have any backup medications. He only has these medications that they have there. He can only prescribe them. If, for example, they told him, why don't you try Synthesit? The cardiologist would gladly prescribe Synthesit. If a person said, maybe you could prescribe me Synthesit? Of course, he would, because giving one medication that solves all the problems is much better than prescribing a bunch of different medications that will, on the contrary, create additional problems. It's much better than prescribing a bunch of different medications that will, on the contrary, create additional problems. So, the situation turned out to be that for the last 10 years, I've read a ton of scientific literature, and they often predicted that a technological revolution is happening in technical matters, technological revolution, and that a drug will be created that will treat dozens of diseases, namely one drug for us, but on a new basis, which will treat dozens of diseases. But of course, back then it was just science fiction, but I thought, yeah, I couldn't even wrap my head around how that could be possible. On the other hand, if such a technological revolution has occurred, if they've learned to carry out all these processes. And honestly, when I took Synthesit, I didn't expect such an effect. On the other hand, if such a technological revolution occurred, if they learned to carry out all sorts of these processes, and honestly, when I took Synthesit, I didn't expect such an effect. So the effect turned out to be much greater than I anticipated. I thought that just some problem would be solved and that's it. But it turned out that a whole range of problems, a whole bunch of issues were resolved. That's the thing. It turned out that a whole series of problems, a whole order of problems were solved. That's the thing. And I realized that Synthesit is exactly the kind of remedy they were talking about and writing about, that breakthrough medications should emerge. that would take the treatment of diseases to a whole new level, and with which you can treat dozens of diseases. This is exactly what fantasy is. It fits. It treats dozens of diseases. By providing oxygen to the tissues, it helps ease the consequences of a stroke for patients after a stroke, for patients after a heart attack, and for other patients, like those with orthopedic issues and so on.
Konstantin Ivanovich, I have a question about your specialty, so to speak. The work to which you have dedicated a lot of your life, what's the main task of a resuscitator? So, it's to make sure the person can breathe? Right. Why does a person come into intensive care? Because they might die. A person is dying. Why? Because they stop breathing. For me, I now understand that the main task of a resuscitator is to ensure that a person breathes steadily, calmly. And they are already transferring him to another department. Am I right or not? I just don't know. I've never been there.
Just a little. The thing is, breathing really needs to be adequate breathing. So when a person is conscious, they need to breathe adequately. And when a person is under anesthesia, they need to breathe adequately. But when he is under anesthesia, if it's general anesthesia, a machine breathes for him. And when there are a bunch of different things happening, for example, he loses consciousness, and beforehand, they give him curare to stop that. Well, this is Lisanon. But it's a respiratory blocker that stops breathing, so the person doesn't resist the machine's inhalation, allowing the machine to pump air into them. So a lot of preparation is done, like what they now call artificial coma in the West. A breathing blocker that blocks breathing, so that a person does not resist inhaling into the device, so that the device can pump it. So a lot of preparation is done, like what they now call artificial coma in the West. In other words, he is put under full anesthesia, and all of this is worked through, and he enters into an artificial coma. And eventually this anesthesia is carried out. So he is fully anesthetized, and he enters into an artificial coma. And in the end, this anesthesia is carried out. So the machine delivers oxygen, a mixed air, because pure oxygen is also not recommended. There should be about 30–40% oxygen in the mixture with air, because pure oxygen can also cause a severe reaction. And that's why the anesthesiologist and the resuscitation specialist monitor the machine to see how much oxygen the person is getting through saturation. Well, let the oximeter be put on and check the saturation, how many percent it shows. If there it gives 96–94%, then 95% is normal. Well, it could even be 100, and if it starts to drop, well, it's very noticeable when a person has insufficient breathing. You can see it. That means their saturation is dropping to 90, maybe 89, and sometimes even lower, like 85. Then, of course, they start looking for the reason why this happened, whether the lung tissue is damaged or if there's some kind of obstruction in the airways. And that's why all of this, of course, involves processes. All these are complex, and everything is focused on delivering oxygen. And that's why all of this, of course, involves processes. All of these processes are complex, and everything is focused specifically on delivering oxygen. In general, all of resuscitation can really be summed up as the delivery of oxygen. And everything else, like blood transfusions, is again to provide hemoglobin and red blood cells to deliver the same oxygen, the oxygen carriers, and all the other things, infusion, and so on. This is all connected exactly with that.
Konstantin Lvovich, excuse me. So our viewers can understand, yes, some people who watch us, for example, or even those who don't watch us, I mean a large percentage of people, they see oxygen as just a given that's floating around them. Yeah, and they somehow breathe. Something is happening there. So, for those people who are watching us and who don't know about the role of oxygen in the body, yes, understood. So can you say a few words? What is this air, which seems to be free around us and it comes to us? Another fact is that it will be free throughout our lives, because in my youth no one sold water. What is this free gas that we don't see, don't feel, which we breathe? Why is it so essential for our body? What kind of process is breathing? So why do we take these breaths? Why do people end up in intensive care when they can breathe? Why can't you hold your breath for a long time and just not breathe? Yes, so what is oxygen for us? Why is oxygen important?
This is indeed the main energy substrate, the one through which all the energy reactions in the body occur, such as, in general, everything happens on a global scale. Yes, it all takes place in the mitochondria, which are cellular structures. Oxidation processes occur there. Oxygen is delivered to the cell for these oxidation processes. These are intracellular oxidation processes, and that's where these metabolic oxidations happen. And that's why a person can last without oxygen for just a few minutes, 2 or 3 minutes. After that, it becomes dangerous because the peripheral tissues start to, these energy processes stop and tissue necrosis simply occurs.
Necrosis is the death of tissues, the dying off of tissues.
Yes, it's the death of tissues, meaning the cell immediately dies. Without receiving this energy, it immediately dies. For example, this is clearly visible. For example, in various diseases, well, take diabetes, it can be dry, so-called dry. There is wet and dry gangrene. Dry gangrene is when the tips of the toes start to die off because this excess glucose in diabetics destroys the microvessels in the periphery. Well, as a rule, the peripheral areas suffer, and that's why the entire periphery starts to die off. So there is no delivery of oxygen. Gangrene starts. And this often happens, especially in diabetics. They say over there. Dad first had his lower leg amputated, then they took the whole leg. They start amputating limbs and so on. Well, that's one example. Well, you can give hundreds of such examples, hundreds, because the delivery, well, this degradation happens very quickly right away, because the body reacts instantly. Well, that's true. Here's brain death, for example, brain death. So how long can the brain go without oxygen? Well, literally there, well, here. Well, they calculated there, and they still argue about it, whether it's 5 or 6 minutes. If you do it for some reason, with drowning people, for example, they say there have been cases where they saved someone after, say, more than 6 minutes without oxygen to the brain. Well, within about 6 minutes, you can still save them. If you do resuscitation correctly, that is, you lay the person on their knee so that everything comes out of them. And so, for example, with a child, they say you need to immediately lay them down with their head down so that everything drains out of them, and then you hit them on the back so that there is some movement of the lungs there. Well, then you should first let the water drain out, and only after that do artificial respiration and chest compressions here. And that's why, well, here.
Valerievich, I always have this in mind, it's like what? Our movies are uplifting when they pull someone out of the water, but not just ours. Usually foreign films show them pulling someone out of the water, and without getting the water out, they start blowing air into them. That's right, yes. It's clear that you need to get the water out first, like, yeah, you have to turn them over somehow, of course, yeah.
And so, of course, if you consider 6 minutes, that's the cost of the absence of oxygen. The brain dies, the brain dies. That means it's already destroyed, but the disappearance of personality, meaning their heart is still beating, everything is still functioning, but the brain is already gone. So he doesn't realize who he is or where he even comes from.
Well, yes, so in Moscow, Lvovich, regarding resuscitation, it's about your specialty and the heart. So, the brain, let's say, on 6 minutes, but the heart, it gradually suffers from a lack of oxygen. It's the same with a heart attack when it gradually develops in a person, that is, a myocardial infarction, due to a lack of oxygen. This mainly happens, right? Am I understanding that correctly?
Of course, of course, of course. There are physiological arteries, such as the coronary arteries, in the body. So, when blood is ejected through the aorta, this ejected blood creates resistance for all the other blood in the circulatory system. And therefore, in turn, ultimately, in essence, and due to this resistance, a small portion of the blood reverses its flow back, and subsequently it enters into the coronary artery. And these coronary arteries are exactly what supply blood. The myocardium itself And so if cholesterol plaques form in those coronary arteries, the lumen narrows, you'll start to feel it. Because the lumen has narrowed, it means less blood is getting through and so on. But the scariest thing, of course, is when a thrombus gets in there, or if a thrombus gets into some other part of the vascular system. If a thrombus gets in, then that whole branch, which, for example, some part they say a posterior infarction, anterior lateral infarction, these are exactly the branches of those coronary arteries that wrap around the heart and supply it. If a branch gets blocked, then that whole part becomes necrotic. Tissue necrosis occurs, and that's exactly what a heart attack is. A heart attack is exactly necrosis. This area is dying. Naturally, the heart can no longer function properly. It's already working partially. The contraction happens like this, so the whole problem is really about delivering oxygen. If, for example, oxygen hasn't been delivered in time, the body hasn't managed to deliver some part of the oxygen, then everything dies. First of all, of course, the microcirculatory vessels, arterioles, and venules die off, which are the most delicate, wonderful tissue, as it's called, the marvelous circulatory system, because it's very tiny. It's kind of airy, it's very small, and it dies first. In some cases of such impacts, it dies, and it's practically impossible to restore it. For example, the renal glomeruli, these are the kidney clusters where the process of blood purification takes place. Yes, if they die, then kidney failure occurs, and the kidneys are already failing. Of course, they can no longer perform their main function, and that's exactly where the problem lies.
Well, I understand. Yes, dear viewers, for those who don't fully grasp the role of oxygen, roughly speaking, if a car runs on an air engine and you block the exhaust pipe or the air intake at the front, the car will stall. Because for gasoline to burn, oxygen is needed. Our body is also a mechanism, basically, and for internal processes to occur, oxygen is also needed, which essentially burns as well. So in essence, we are big engines. Yes, each of our cells is an engine. Oxygen is also needed, which essentially burns as well. So basically, we are big engines. Yes, each of our cells is an engine. So if oxygen doesn't reach a certain tissue, like the brain, in a certain area, could that lead to a stroke or something? So in the tissue, you just heard the heart. Yes, a wonderful story by Konstantin Lvovich. So means that we have heart attacks in the front, back, lateral, and so on. And it's the same everywhere, yes, like on the skin. We also have blood vessels, where some vessels get clogged. Yes, the capillaries, these ones. A wonderful network, not a wonderful network. But the point is that if a little capillary gets clogged, everything around it starts to necrotize. Yes, and the cells around that little capillary basically die off. So that's why oxygen is so important. The permeability of pathways is a very important thing. And that's exactly what it synthesizes. It helps lower the Moreau levels of cholesterol and age-related hormones and thins the blood. Yes, that means that the red blood cells are sticking together in clumps, saturating with oxygen to produce new red blood cells and new blood cells. This means that it actually promotes the penetration of oxygen to places where it hadn't reached just a few days ago, what Konstantin Lvovich wonderfully testifies about with his father. So, Konstantin Lvovich, last time you said that Synthesit is the elixir of life. Do you still hold the same belief, or has something changed for you?
I am even more amazed. The more I take it, the more I am amazed by its divine origin. I feel like it practically heals everything that can be healed. It heals stress, it calms you down, it gives you energy. So it's a super remedy, really, just super.
It doesn't heal, but gives energy and promotes blood saturation with oxygen. The body heals itself, give the body normal blood to its destination with normal oxygen and the right nutrients, which is also very important to have proper nutrients, so that the body doesn't start breaking itself down, which by the way is also important so that there is a certain set there, so that the body does not destroy itself and does not try to synthesize itself from thin air. The body can generally cope with any ailment. As they say, the body is a self-balancing system. So it's trying to return to a state of normalcy, the one that it remembers, to an ideal state. so that you are mobile, active, healthy, the reproductive system works. But for that to happen, you need the factor of the same oxygen and energy, because perhaps the synthesis carries some kind of energy that we can't measure right now, but in the future we will be able to measure it. Why does this particular ion carry this specific energy? And only what you might be feeling, which many, by the way, people say that they feel some energy when they take the synth. I also sometimes feel something in the area of my throat, like there's something there. I take 1.5 regular capsules or 3 monoactivators, feel like eating, I'm not very hungry, my energy is high, and there's a sensation in my forehead. It's a healthy tension. I believe science will help us understand this better in the future. By the way, I don't feel that hungry, my energy is high, and there's this interesting sensation in the area of my forehead. It's such a tension, such energy, such healthy energy, so to speak. In the future, of course, I believe that science will help us understand this better.
Alexander, can I address the viewers for a moment?
Of course, of course.
Dear viewers, Alexander and I are telling you that this is a wonderful drug, that it works. But until you definitely try it, you can talk a great deal. But you really need to absolutely give it a go. Just take one package and simply try this medication. There are a lot of stories on this topic. You know, the old Jew Moish always stayed in the synagogue when everyone else left, and he prayed. He said, "Well, Lord, why do I keep all the vows I pray to you? Why can I never win the lottery?" Well, my Lord, don't you give me a win? And suddenly a thunderous voice is heard. "My dear Moish, I've prepared $1 million win for you a long time ago. But you haven't bought a single lottery ticket. You see, that's the thing. What? If you don't try it yourself, you can say that when you try it yourself, when you feel it, that's when you'll really understand. You'll understand what it is, how it works, when you start to feel empowered, when you begin to tackle complex life problems. You know, as they say, the price is high, back and forth. When you gain strength, when you start to tackle complex life problems. You know, as they say, the price is high, back and forth. Let me tell you a simple story. Right now, everyone knows what spinal anesthesia is. Well, they give an injection in the back, numb the area, and then perform the surgery. I've personally conducted hundreds of such anesthetics, by the way. Spinal anesthetics. But in the last century, none of this existed. Some doctors started developing it, but it was incredibly expensive because they had to develop the needles themselves, the entire production process, and so on. It was terrifying, expensive. And America, there was this billionaire, Mr. Jones. He had several $1 billion, and he was always counting, investing in stocks, always running it through his mind. He was running those billions through his mind. And one day they tell him, "Dear Mr. Jones, we've found a hernia. And you absolutely need to have surgery, because if you don't, you'll be in really bad shape." And he says, "What kind of anesthesia will I have?" They tell him, "You'll have general anesthesia. That is, we'll turn off your brain, to put it correctly, your consciousness. You'll be asleep. And during that time, we'll perform the surgery." And Mr. Jackson says, "How? You'll turn off my consciousness? What if during that time someone steals $1 million from me?" "You're going to turn off my consciousness. What if someone steals $1 million from me during that time? Should I be aware of this?" No, this won't work. Give me anesthesia that doesn't turn off my consciousness." They say, "Well, there is such anesthesia, but you need to pay $1 million for it because that clinic is developing it, and it costs $1 million. Even though he was very greedy, he understood that he could lose everything. He might not even wake up. And he invested that $1 million, and the clinic developed it. So that anesthesia cost him $1 million. The clinic developed it. And now no one even thinks about spinal anesthesia. So what, spinal? And I want that kind of anesthesia. And I want that kind because just recently it was achievable. What I'm getting at is that all What people say about the price? Well, you have to understand that nothing is more valuable to a person than health. Nothing is more valuable than his life and health. And what if they say to you, oh, sweet, handsome Alexander, just look, he's such a good person. Here he is talking to hundreds of people who are suffering, who are sick. He explains things to them, and that's it. Well, it's really hard to explain to a person, well, just buy it and give it a try. Don't be like this Moish, understand? Who prays and keeps putting off the purchase. Buy it, try it, and everything will be clear to you. Sorry, I just bored you.
Well, those who buy, yes, are regular customers. We have a few thousand of them. We're already closer to 10,000 regular customers. They don't really ask questions, you know. People ask questions, you know, those who can find them somewhere. Regular iron citrate sold on various websites. Yes, it costs around 400, 300 rubles. For a jar, 25 milligrams in one capsule, there are, let's say, 60 or 80 capsules in there. I don't remember the point of how much it costs. It's 15 times cheaper there. And a regular jar with that concentration, it's dozens of times higher than ours. Yes, but it's clear that if this person who is asking these questions buys this iron citrate, yes, the American one, and starts taking those tablets, then nothing will happen. Besides possible intoxication, he won't get what his body needs. Because 25 milligrams in one capsule is a lot. Yes, so like this is completely different iron. So we have a unique technology. Yes, we use a file on it. I'm not bragging, but we don't extract this iron from the earth with a file. No. We have our own unique technology. Thanks to this, it becomes bioactive and easily accessible. So basically, it's effective. Yes, so like you said, it helps with a wide range of issues. I see it myself, yes. I've communicated with hundreds of people through messages. So, you have about 170 reviews now, right? We're taking feedback from a person who agreed to talk on video. Especially since you're a doctor, you're providing this kind of consultation based on your practice. So for me, all of this is obvious. Yes, if someone among the people, as they say, has doubts, you also watched for a long time, right? You say a year, but in reality it's less. Did you watch the ad from Sanya in Florida, listen to it and thought, what is this all about?
Alexander, who is going to compensate me for the damage. If I had started taking Synthesit 6 months ago, I would already be Superman.
Hey! Ha ha ha.
Who is going to compensate me? Why didn't you tell me 6 months ago?
You make the decision yourself, so dear viewers, we certainly can't make the decision for you. Konstantin Lvovich expressively shares his feelings and thoughts, saying he lost a lot of time not taking it. By the way, now today. When we post this video, it might be in a week or maybe a week and a half when we upload it. And on the day we take it, a post will be published. A man took Synthesit for a year. What happened to listen? So there is a kind of dynamic before, during and after. Today's post is quite interesting, so no one will simply compensate you. And no one will remind you how you felt after you started taking Synthesit. More precisely, before you started taking Synthesit compared to after you started taking it. So you just forget like how stylish it was, that your head used to hurt before you forgot. And many forget that they already slept more, ate more, and worked less. You quickly get used to the good and forget about it, and it's just like they fly into the world, it becomes the norm. So dear viewers, those of you who are taking Synthesit or who will be taking Synthesit, make sure to keep a journal before starting Synthesit. So, self-feeling, sleep, activity, mood, I fell asleep like this, I woke up like that, I combed my hair, this much hair fell out, I ate this much today, my mood was like this throughout the day, I felt this way. Got tired at this time, didn't want to do anything at that time, lay down on the couch, turned on the TV. I drank some beer and so on. Is that everything you know about yourself? What exercises are you doing? How many exercises do you do? How do you run? How do you jump? Any additional tests to take? Nothing will hurt, so that you can compare with yourself later and understand what your dynamics are to make the right choice for yourself in the future. That's why I thank Konstantin Lvovich for taking the time to talk to us in detail today. So they talked about their life. We delved a little into medical terminology. I think many viewers now understand how important oxygen is. Hope we will meet again. Dear viewers, if you have any questions, feel free to write to our group on VK. A video will also be published there. If you're watching it on YouTube right now, you can also write your questions to Konstantin Lvovich there. We'll do our best. Of course, I will answer all your questions. On YouTube, our videos have comments disabled, because YouTube is a network where a lot of trolls can quickly swarm in and write all sorts of nasty things. And then you'll just be exhausted trying to delete it all. That's why on VK you can see what kind of person he is, where he lives, and whether he is our customer. And you can always communicate with people in a reasonable way. Konstantin Lvovich, thank you very much once again. Dear viewers, thank you for watching.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.